right, thank you, everybody. Hello? There we go. Thank you for joining us here on our Monday, March 10th Board of Education work session. I would invite you all to please join me in standing and saying the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Our first item is public comment or recognition of visitors. Recognition of visitors for any items on the agenda for any concern. The Board of Education welcomes comments from the public. Each person wishing to speak is asked to speak into the microphone, identify themselves, and respectively limit their comment to 3 minutes. All speakers are to conduct themselves in a civil manner. Obscene language, libelous statements, threats of violence, statements advocating racial, religious, or other forms of prejudice will not be tolerated. Persons wishing to discuss matters involving individual district personnel or students should present their comments and/or concerns to the superintendent during regular business hours. Any takers for public comment? Okay, that was quick. We will move on to the next item here, which is the consent agenda. We have 7 items here. Is committee there before? Yeah. Did I miss something? Okay. I did. Committee updates. Christian?
So 2 committee, one related to OXPA, and the second related to the school board lobbying day up in Albany, which happened a while ago, but we haven't had a meeting since then. So OXPA met last week, and the subject of the meeting, the discussion, was about student representation on the board. It was actually pretty wide-ranging discussion, positive discussion, and there are several things that, whether we adopt a formal policy on this, which is being required, I think, by July 1st or June 1st. Several things that were kind of suggested. The first one is that what some districts have done is that they have 1 junior and 1 senior representative, and the idea was that the junior would then migrate into senior and have some more experience, and then you would have more diversity because it would be from different classes, and I think that was worthy of consideration. The second thing is that what some districts in the area have done is they've tasked the student representatives with a research project to speak on something that is student-related and to make a presentation to the board. And they found that that focused their attention, focused their efforts, and gave them something to focus on through the year. And I think that would be a valuable thing. And they acted as sort of reporters and researchers, and then usually 2/3, 3/4 of the year. And they found that was very successful, and it helped them, really address the student issue in a concrete way. And the other thing that came out is that in how they chose a student representative was, it was usually an interview with the board, and most of them felt that the student representative should be chosen some way by the students, whether through an election, and Monroe-Woodbury had an example of this, and they've had it for a long time, or appointed by the student government, or in some way through that, with some, let's say, final determination by the board. And I think we'll probably discuss this since we're required to have a policy on it, but those were some of the points made during that session, during that meeting.
Can I ask a question on that? Because one, I haven't, if you say we don't have a policy on it, I'll take your word for it. I haven't done that research, but.
I think it's 2245.
So we do have a policy?
No, that's the number that and the model NYSBA policy. The model NYSBA policies. But I don't think we have one. We just have had a practice.
Yeah, my question is with the state law, and maybe you know or don't know, but hopefully this came up. Do they have to attend every meeting? Because we have them attend every other meeting. Is that something that we need to look at as well?
I think it just requires all districts to have student representation on their board.
Okay.
They would not be allowed to vote. They would not be privy to any confidential information.
Of course. Yeah.
But otherwise, and that there's a suggestion that there would be some type of training potentially, although that wasn't specified. And I think the requirement by this is, and this was a state, I believe, law. I think this was like a law passed requiring it, or a change from the education department. don't quote me on that, I'm not sure exactly what the source, but there was a requirement to have a policy. And so some districts that did not have student representation to this point, like Florida and Middletown, have adopted it in anticipation of this requirement. And so that's why they were asking how other districts had fared. And, you know, different districts that do have a robust program and have had it for over 10 years, they were inquiring the different models that existed.
Sure, yeah, great.
And if you want on the lobbying day.
Please.
I mean, I think this is fairly straightforward. Generally, the legislators were very in line with modifying the EV bus, either by providing more financial support or by extending the timeline, and it seemed that there pretty much was a consensus across the board. Most of well, I should say, all the legislators were in support of what NISBA has asked, which is for more local flexibility on how to implement the cell phone ban that the governor had proposed, and also providing resources, meaning subsidization of the resources to districts to help cover some of the costs of implementing that. I know they had that, the budget number that was proposed in the governor's budget, but they were thinking that it probably would be that money, under their understanding, was to research it about what the need in the year one, and there would be more money in subsequent years once that people had established their policy, that there'd be more subsidization towards school districts on that front. So that's how they were saying it's kind of nebulous at this point, but that was their understanding by what was allocated in the governor's budget. And other than that, I think that they all were trying to get us as much money for all our districts as much as possible across the board.
Thank you. And by they, you mean Senator Skoufis and Assemblyman
I
Ekus?
talked to 4 people.
Okay.
Senator Rollison, who represents not really our district, but I was in the meeting with him, and he represents Newburgh, Valley Central, and then across on the other side. Assemblyman Brian Mayer, who represents Washington. Actually, I think he represents a small little acre of our district where it crosses over into Blooming Grove. And Skoufis and Ekus.
Great, thank you. Policy Committee, I don't think we'll need an update there because we are seeing the fruits of your labor later in our agenda.
Yeah, I'll jump on it anyway. Yeah, we met 2/27, February 27th. 2 of our 4 members couldn't attend though, through conflicts. So we're not recommending any policies for adoption tonight. We're treating it all as a first reading. And those policies that make it through with no revisions, and we'll put on the agenda next time. But anything that incites any significant revisions, we would just put on our docket for the spring, so the policy committee itself could weigh in as a whole. But yeah, everything else is on the agenda for tonight.
Great, thank you.
Just one quick follow-up. Yeah, I was one of the 2 members who couldn't make the meeting, so I emailed my review to Brendan and the rest of the committee.
Great, thank you. Visitation, Richard isn't here.
Yeah, I got his report.
Okay.
If you want me to read it, you want me to pass, whatever you want to do. But he did give me his report.
Sure.
Okay. So Cornwall Central School District Visitation Committee report. The visitations were January 14th, 16th, and 17th, and this was presented by Richard Schaffner. The introduction: the Visitation Committee recently visited each school in the district to listen, observe, and better understand the success and challenges within our schools. The purpose of this report is to summarize the committee's findings and provide recommendations that can help improve our district in a way that benefits both students and staff. Throughout our visits, we saw dedicated, passionate teachers and staff members working hard to provide high-quality instructions to their students. We also heard valuable insights and concerns about areas where improvements can be made to ensure that our schools remain a place where students thrive. Our goal as the Visitations Committee is to ensure that all voices in the district are heard and that we work together towards solutions that benefit everyone. Findings by school. Willow Avenue School, technology and iReady implementations. Teachers shared concerns that iReady requires additional supplemental materials to take it to a complete and effective curriculum. Two, some teachers expressed that the online learning modules that take significant time to complete, limiting direct teachers' instructions. And number three, the decisions to adopt iReady over Go Math was made as part of a pilot program. However, some staff felt that the more opportunity for the input would have been beneficial before a final decision was made. We're gonna get this open here, huh? There we go. Board of Education visibility. Staff expressed interest in more opportunities for the direct engagement with the Board of Ed to share their experiences and feedback. Some staff shared shared that they were unsure whether emails sent to the BOE were being received directly or whether they were filtered through other channels first. There is a desire for BOE visits to be more informal, organic, allowing board members to get a well-rounded view of a day-to-day operations of the school. Recommendations. Provide additional guidance and professional development for iReady is best integrated into daily instructions. 2, create more informal opportunities for BOE visits to increase transparency and open communications. 3, clarify how BOE communications is handled to ensure all messages are reaching their intended recipients. Now we're moving on to Cornwall Elementary School. School climate and communication. Some staff expressed the need for more consistency in policy enforcement, particularly in those areas where, such as attendance and professional expectations with staff. 2, is a few staff members noted that the responses from building leadership to emails and inquiries sometimes take longer than expected, which needs to be addressed. Moving on is technology and digital learning. Similar Willow Avenue teachers shared the iReady implementation's present challenges and requires additional resources to supplement instructions. You need me to?
I'm wondering if this just isn't better shared via email with the board.
However you want it, man. I just got it and I'm redoing what I was told.
Okay, I do want to bring up one thing that's on here that was the important one, and that was the concern at CES on the class sizes, space limitation, the use of classrooms, and how they're being utilized. We witnessed a class that was being held in an extremely tiny room, not conducive to learning at all, and it was students that do have some special needs. We also saw a classroom that was being held at the bottom of a stairwell. There were carts there, and the supplies were in the carts for the teachers to instruct those students. So those were our concerns. The bottom of the back stairwell. I don't think you came down with us over there.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
But there weren't students there.
No, but the carts were there, and they were just being dismissed. There was about
Okay.
3 students.
I did not see that.
Yeah. So those are some concerns at CES, and
I
that
just,
I
I
think
would
it's
just,
best to
I feel
share.
like this is wholly inappropriate, and this is something that should have been shared with administration and been addressed, then, I feel like it's an ambush from a person who wrote it, who's not even here to discuss it.
Was it shared with administration, Terry?
No, it
don't
was
know.
not.
I don't know. Did Richard share this with them? I don't
No.
know.
I will say that I was under the impression it was shared. I did not know that we were going to read the whole report this evening, because I am on that committee. So I think that we can certainly go back and do a high-level summary, because I think it's worth, some of the observations are what they are, but I think it's also worth mentioning that while the feedback is valuable and it's insight, it provides some insight and some direction, we only spoke to a very small number of people in the building. And so I think in fairness to the administration and to everyone overall, not you, Carl, specifically, but if as a committee, we're going to say, you know, the climate or the culture, et cetera, I think we need to talk to more than a handful of people to jump to that conclusion. I think we heard it, we brought it up, we're aware, but I don't think we can say that that is a widespread sentiment. It might be, but I don't know that we can say that it is at this point.
Well, I got the report, and when I got the report, I kind of figured something was gonna come back. So what I did is I made some copies. So if you guys would like to have copies of what I got, I have
Sure, at
them.
the end of the meeting, yeah, that'd be
Yeah,
great.
I got them.
Yeah, I will just say past practice, including last year when Richard was also the chairperson of this committee, was after visitations were made, a round of visitations in the fall or the spring, that the committee chairperson and potentially other members of the committee sat down with the administration and discussed these issues, you know, to make sure that concerns are heard and potentially addressed, which isn't to say that they shouldn't be shared to the broader group here, just that, to Christine's point, a condensed version was shared rather than reading an entire report. No, thank you. So I'm not sure why that meeting wasn't set now, when it has been set in previous years with Richard, but he's not here to answer that question, so I don't know if, Terry, did you have something to add?
No,
Oh,
just,
okay.
that was our expectation, is that we would have a chance to hear and respond and make
Right.
sure that the board was hearing kind of some next steps as well, if they
Right.
were already in progress.
Yeah, so I will, if Richard, you watch on the replay here, I would advise you to please set a meeting with Terry and bring your committee members that you choose with you and have this discussion, and we provide a condensed report to us later. On to Facilities Committee, where I am the chair. We have not had a meeting since our last update. We're working on scheduling one with Palumbo Group to update timeline for this coming summer. Audit Committee, Christian, I know that you're going to say we haven't had a meeting because I'm on that committee. Communication, Brendan.
No meeting since the last time. We should be scheduling a meeting soon. Kind of have a wheel stuck in the mud on a particular initiative, but then we'll have to be planning that plus our end-of-year budget push, which is coming sooner than later. So more to come at the next meeting on that.
Thank you. We'll move on to the consent agenda. We have items, purpose of the consent agenda is to make more effective use of its time by adopting a single motion to cover those relatively routine matters which are included. Any member of the board who wishes to discuss individually a particular piece of business on the consent agenda may so indicate, and that item will be considered and voted on separately. We have items 2 through 7 this evening. Can I have a motion? So moved. A second? Second. And then who would like to pull an item for discussion? Bass?
Number 4.
Number 4. Christian?
I would like to pull 3, 7, and 8.
3, 7, and 8. Are there 8? I didn't, there's 9. 7 and 8 are combined about. Yes, there's 9. Sorry, so I said 2 through 7. So let's try that again. Can I get a motion on 2 through 9? Second?
Second.
Second. Anybody want to pull anything other than 3, 4, 7, or 8? So we will then vote on items 2, 5, 6, and 9. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? I'll go out of numerical order because we'll go to Bass first, and then we'll go to Christian, so you can do everything together. So Bass, item 4, which is approval of the student calendar.
Yes, thanks, Jim. I just have a comment. I just want to, commend, those who put the calendar together, and specifically for restoring, I would say, the Columbus Day on October 13, 2025. Just to remind everybody, last year it appeared on the agenda as the fall break. It didn't mention Columbus at all. And we did talk about it. There were some reasons why that happened, but I have myself to blame because I did not review it in time, and it was too late when it came to my attention that it's not called Columbus Day. So again, kudos to putting Columbus Day on the calendar. Thanks.
Wonderful. Any other questions?
I do see that it says Columbus/Indigenous Peoples' Day on this version. I do recall the conversation from last year as well, though, Bass. I also would like to point out, since we're discussing the calendar, I wouldn't necessarily have pulled it, but I still am in favor of February break. I think it's beneficial. I know we go by BOCES normally, but there are other school districts. I think Middletown and Tuxedo kept February break this year, and some others. And it is workable if you don't have 2 weeks off for Christmas, New Year's, whatever holiday you celebrate in that 2-week time frame. You could pull the 2 in the beginning of the week, and you could pull 1 perhaps on the 2nd, which I know another school district did, and you could make that up and still keep your February, very valuable February break in the middle of winter when people need a break. That's my 2 cents.
Terry, would you like to?
I made the joke, that's not really a joke, people want both. So everyone wants a long winter break and everyone wants the February recess, so there's a push and pull there. The push for the calendar committee and myself and the superintendents when we were developing the calendar is we just know what happens when you pull the 1 day or 2 days of winter break, no one comes. Same thing with the 2nd. There will be 20% of our kids here in school, so that's kind of the balance that we're trying to strike. And the other thing that I let my committee know is, my own wife wants February break, so I'm unpopular with that in my own household, but trying to strike that balance of the 3-day Thanksgiving that we have that some other districts don't have, the longer Memorial Day weekend are just kind of where we.
Others have a half a day before
Exactly.
Thanksgiving instead of that full day as well,
Right.
to make up for that as well. I did take a peek at other calendars before I opened my big mouth.
Okay, any other comments on item 4, the 25-26 school calendar? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, on to item number 3, OU BOCES Board Candidate Resolution.
Can I
Christian,
just take 7 and 8 just first as a group, and then I'll get back to 3?
they're your questions, so I'll let you tackle them in the order you feel.
So 7 and 8 have to do with the creation of a reserve fund, and since I'm just peeked ahead at the budget presentation, and since
A
they're
capital reserve
the
fund.
capital reserve fund, what did I say? A reserve fund, yes, a capital reserve fund. And since I'm just peeked ahead at the budget presentation, since there's an extensive discussion about reserve funds, I think it might behoove us to make this motion after that presentation, and we'll be just more informed. And so I would think that perhaps voting on this later, after that presentation, might be a better way to proceed. And I'm not doctrinaire about this, but there are some points I would like to make on this, but I think it would be better just after the budget presentation, which includes discussion of our reserve funds, including capital reserve funds.
So I'll just say for myself personally, what we're doing here is we're authorizing, capital reserve needs to be approved by the voters. So we're authorizing as a board to put this as an item on the upcoming budget vote for the voters to approve. So ultimately, the voters will approve whether or not to open a new capital reserve. Our current capital reserve is full, and all this is doing is voting to establish opening a piggy bank specifically for capital projects. It does not encumber any funds into that reserve. It just says, hey, let's open a piggy bank. So
So-
just so it's clear for the public, so I have enough personal information to vote on that right now. I'm not sure.
Okay, so here
How the
then maybe
presentation
just
will
bring my brief
change that.
concerns on it, then why I think that it might.
Yeah.
And as you know, Jim, because we have just talked about this before, that I suggested that we do need to create a capital reserve fund because it's full, and it's likely that we are going to have a surplus because we budget more than what we spend for obvious reasons. And that since our unallocated fund balance is full and our reserve funds are full, that means that we will have nowhere to put this money, and so there has to be somewhere to put it, and therefore the creation of reserve fund is prudential. My concern about this is that, given that we are right up on the cap, right up in terms of like our budget and our revenues, that, and I've brought this up before when we made the allocation to, or we made the vote to put the money into the reserve fund, and usually in the fall, that we might want to have a discussion about how we might allocate some of this money towards some of the priorities and needs that were identified, rather than defaulting and putting it into the capital reserve fund and having that part of the budget discussion. But I'm also concerned about that, the line in the resolution that says the surplus will go into this fund, and I would want to have perhaps a broader view on that, about that can be used for different things, since we're kind of talking about, we have no leverage here when we're talking about the budget, but we're also expecting, given the previous years, over $1 million in terms of what will be left over. And rather than spending it necessarily on the capital reserve, there perhaps are other priorities that money might be used for. And before we create that, perhaps the language in there could be clarified or concerned. And that's my point on this, and that's why I would like to push it on the other side of the discussion or presentation about the reserve funds.
So it's not my understanding that we're forced to use it. Perhaps you're reading the resolution different than I am. John or Terry, if you want to answer that specific question.
That's correct. So this is just the establishment. It's going to put it forward to the voters, and then how we fund it will be determined later on. We will have the option to put any surplus from our revenue or expenditures into any one of our restricted reserve accounts, including this reserve account, if it is established. And then if we do establish this reserve account, we can use this money towards the capital projects and all the list of items that we have raised as priorities in terms of improving our school district. And we also still have our outstanding building condition survey that has yet to be turned into us, which will have additional issues that will be brought to the district that need to be addressed. And so having this reserve account would allow us to address those as well.
Thank you. Yeah, that's my understanding. And I will say, you know, this past year, actually, I guess this school year, but we voted on, with surplus from last year's budget, to put 100% of that figure into capital reserve. In years past, we've put it into ERS reserve, TRS reserve, tax certiorari reserve, so we've put it into different reserves in past years. It just so happened in this past year that 100% of it went into capital reserve, but that's certainly not a guarantee. So, any other questions, comments on this item?
I had a question, actually. Help me understand right when I think I know all of this, then I realize maybe I don't. The difference between 7 and 8. So 7 refers to just the reserve fund, and then 8 refers to the capital reserve fund. So I'm guessing those are two different funds, two different purposes. I know capital reserve fund is everything we just talked about. It's really more about 7.
They're both capital reserve funds. So this information comes directly from our bond counsel. Our bond counsel writes these resolutions for the school district in accordance with New York State standards for this. So 7 actually has to come before 8 in the operations of this. So 7 is you, as the board members, creating this or authorizing this to go to the voters, and then 8 is what the voters will see on the ballot, is that language for them to approve.
And it just happens that the legal language that came down from the state or wherever refers to it in that
capacity of reserve.
as a reserve fund, not a
Correct.
capital reserve fund.
And then you get to distinguish what type of reserve fund it will be.
Got it. Okay.
So I'll just move on to 3 just quickly, and I guess we can vote on 3, 7, and 8, or separate them.
Since we're on 7 and 8, we'll just take a vote on those and close those out and then move on to 3. So all in favor of 7 and 8?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? We have 1 abstention from Mr. Brunelli. 6 yeses, so that motion carries. Item 3. Item 3 is the OU BOCES Board candidate resolutions. There are 3 candidates running for 3 vacant seats on the OU BOCES Board. Christian.
So this is just a statement more than a question. I know some people have interactions with the candidates, and I just wanted to say, a quick word of endorsement for those people who are not familiar. William Boss has been, I think, on school boards since perhaps the 70s, if not the 80s. And Christine, I see you smiling since you know him as well. He's an incredibly dedicated person. He is a person who is a voice on OXPA and has always been helpful and active, and I think that he's a worthy candidate. And Mr. Edwin Estrada also has been very active and been on the Middletown board, and I think is a true advocate for vocational education. And I think anyone who knows him knows about that, as well as, let's say, the students of the county. I will say, I'm not trying to diminish the third person, I'm just not as familiar with him, but I think that these are worthy candidates, and I would encourage, us voting for them, nominating them, if that's the motion right now.
Great, thank you for that. Item 3, all in favor? Aye?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, thank you for that. That brings us to the end of our consent agenda. Brings us to new business, non-consent agenda, first reading of BOE policies. I will list those policies per document. I will not read them all right now. So again, to Brendan's point, none of these were put as a second reading because there was only 2 out of 4 members at the last committee meeting, even though a lot of these are minor changes and typically would go straight to a second reading and evaluation as they're just updating existing policies. None of these are new policies. They're all updates on existing, but they are all first readings. So let's get a motion and then a second, and then we will pull out any individual policies that people would like to discuss. So can I get a motion?
So moved.
And a second? Second from Tiffany. And then I guess I will go first and tell you what policies I would like to discuss. I have comments on 0310, board self-evaluation, and 0111, which is sexual harassment. And I know that we're also going to have discussion on filling board vacancies 2150. Any other policies that folks would like a comment or discussion on? Bass?
I just want to go back to what I mentioned earlier. I don't think we're ready to vote right now. I mean, I just emailed my review like 2 or 3 hours ago.
So there were, most of the policies you didn't have comments on, so I would assume that you are ready to.
Well,
to be
have
clear, though.
comments on each of the 4 batches.
Yeah, no, I know.
Yeah.
But I'm saying most of the policies, though, individual policies you didn't have. So let me just restate the plan.
I can tell you where I had my comments.
I don't want to speak for you, so feel free to do so.
Yeah.
I'm just restating what what we're voting on. We wouldn't be voting to approve any of the policies. This is the first reading.
Okay.
So if something comes through with no changes, we can say, okay, we approve that, we pass that through to the next meeting where it can be approved.
Okay.
And if there are any policies where there is substantial input,
Right.
then we would remove them. We wouldn't push them to be approved at the next meeting. We would put them on the docket for the policy committee for the spring. So I'm saying for the individual policies where you don't have comments, and if those are,
It's just-
then we can push them through, not approve them tonight, but push them through for approval at next meeting.
Okay.
Yep.
So, sorry, where do,
Okay, so we left off with Bass saying that he has other comments
I guess,
on other
where
policies.
are we on the policies that he has comments on? Are
Yeah,
we gonna-
so do you want, I mean, I have them in front of me, Bass, you have them in front of you. I mean, do you want to state it?
I mean, here, go through the whole list, I mean, sexual harassment, I have comments, board self-evaluation, I have comments.
Yeah, microphone, Bass, sorry.
Sorry. Yeah, I have definitely on the sexual harassment, I have on the board self-evaluation. I have more, I have on the alcohol and drug testing of drivers. And I have, I don't know if it's under opioid overdose.
You know, graduation requirements? I'm just
Graduation,
looking- I'm
yeah,
looking
yeah.
at it right now.
Thank you, yes, yes, yeah.
And I'll double
So-
check those, Bass, just to be sure you didn't miss
So
one.
that's what, 4 policies?
And most of them are what you said, or 2 of them are what you said, so,
2 of them are what I said.
yeah.
Brendan, as it's your committee, do you want to?
I have on board officers,
I would say that.
Do you want to kick those back to committee? Do you
So,
want to discuss them?
I would offer that you make your comments on self-evaluation and.
My comments are minor, so maybe we'll take, you want to take those 4 or 5 policies and kick them back to
We
the
can
committee?
certainly just remove them, yeah, absolutely, and then put them on.
So let's,
Just to be,
let's remove, so we're going to remove 0310, which is the board self-evaluation. We're gonna remove 0111, which is sexual harassment. What other policies are we removing?
2150?
The board
Well,
officers, I believe.
Bass, I don't think you had a comment on 2150, did you?
No, I have board officers. I mean,
Yeah.
my comment is like, when board president attends a committee, he shouldn't be voting. I mean, I think it goes under 2220.
Okay, so 2220. So what I'm looking at here, Christian, is policies to pull, to kick back to committee, to not vote on at all tonight,
Yeah.
not comments on policies. So 2150, we can comment and discuss tonight. 011,
Yeah.
0110, 2250, you said, 8414.5, alcohol and drug testing, we're gonna pull that.
Right, and 4770, graduation requirement.
Okay,
So 2150, I think should be, sorry. I think 2150 should also be kicked back to committee because it didn't go through the committee process even to get to this tonight.
but it went through the committee process last year, so,
Last year is a different board and it's a different committee, and it doesn't carry over when you reorganize.
okay. So we can have that discussion in a moment. Any other policies, Bass?
I believe that's
Yes.
all.
Okay. So 4 policies total.
For me, 5.
5. Sorry, well, I've got 0110, 2220, 4770, and 8414.5.
Yeah, and 0310.
Although I think that comment was small enough that we could probably address that here, the board self-evaluation.
Okay.
So, yeah.
So we'll discuss 0310 and 2150 and see where we end with those two. So we've got 4 that we're gonna pull totally.
Can you just repeat, because we went back and forth?
Yes. So here's what we're gonna pull totally and not vote on tonight. 0110, 2220, I guess the 0110 sexual harassment, 2220 is board officers, 4770 graduation requirements, 8414.5 alcohol and drug testing. We are going to discuss 0310 board self-evaluation and 2150 filling board vacancies. Any other policies that people would like to discuss? Okay, so let's discuss 0310. Bass, your comments on that? Or board self-evaluation?
Okay.
the self-evaluation-
Yeah, my comment, as Brendan, alluded to, very, very simple. I'm questioning kind of, the whole policy is like half a page, is like small paragraph. And I agree, yeah, we have to really evaluate ourselves, but how would you enforce the policy? And what if somebody is found in violation of the policy? What do you do with them? You put them in jail? So the policy, the way it's written, it's kind of, nice paragraph, but so what?
I think it's that we have to initiate it as a board, but whether people participate is,
Yeah, I did mention kind of, I proposed the policy before, 2 years ago, and I was criticized for the same comments I just made right now. Like, it's not clear, how do you enforce it? What do you do if somebody violates it?
I think we force hard labor with Walter's crew.
So education law, section 2112, allows us to fine someone who refuses to or fails to perform an official act on a school board up to $10.
All right.
So that is what our authority is. I think does not include hard labor. But since I'm the one who suggested the changes in this policy from the previous policy, I have some comments on it as well.
Yeah, I'll just throw in, my comment was, I think the changes are good. You just, I'm questioning the timeline. So it says, conduct self-evaluation by the end of January. To me, I think it'd be more fitting to do it in the springtime as the year is complete. So that timeline seems off to me. It seems like would be conducted by the end of, May or June.
So, this is a logic, and the logic was that, last year we conducted it, I believe, at the second, in the executive session at the second January meeting, which means the instrument had gone out, I think, before, in late December. I think January it's like a mid-year pause, and it gives us a chance to reflect and actually make changes if we are in the wrong direction that are meaningful. And if we put it off to further in the spring, yes, it might be more accurate, but then, well, we're kind of at the end of the year. Plus, as we all know, the spring is full with budget discussions and matters, and therefore it kind of gets lost in the middle of that. And I think it would be better to finish it before budget season begins, which would be usually in February. The second thing we did is, so my motivation on this was that to make sure it gets done. And because it's in our board goals, and not just this year, but in previous years, and we thought about just, in a sense, setting a date and also giving someone responsibility, but not necessarily a punishment for failure, would help ensure that it does get done in a timely manner. And we felt associating it with or at least I felt associating with the office of the vice president of the board would give them a specific responsibility and also allow someone to initiate the process and know that they have a timeline to get it started, perhaps cajole people to get it completed, and perhaps organize it and not put an additional duty on the president, because the president already has more than a few specific duties, and the vice president only has duties in place of the president or in the president's absence. So that was, I guess, my logic, but I'm open, and I think, Brendan, we discussed this, that we weren't committed to a particular person. It was just a matter of making sure there was some accountability by just designating people with the responsibility and designating, a timeline to maybe perhaps persuade us to get it done.
I think that's a summary of the discussion. Your question was my question. I did find myself persuaded by the notion that, one thing Christian did not mention, but I think we mentioned it that night, which that having it mid-year allows us to do something with the information. We're only a board for a year. We always change by losing and adding new members. So having it at the end of the year could actually be too late for us to do anything, to do anything with the information. So the more we talked about it, the more the January touch point seemed right. And it's typically a slower month. We actually have time to do it. And then, about the person throwing out the vice president, somebody has to be in charge of executing it, and it was just, hey, let's put a name on it, and we can discuss it if people have other ideas.
So I agree with all that. I will argue to make it even more robust in that the reason it was a board goal last year is because it hadn't been done in memory. Whatever that time period was just hadn't been done. So John Edelin, as our president last year, said we should do a mid-year check-in. So I'll propose that we do something similar that we do the superintendent review. I agree with the logic of the mid-year check-in is we do a mid-year check-in as a board and say, here's, our review of your goals. And then we also do an end-of-the-year review. So I would argue for board, let's just do both.
Oh, yes, it wasn't, I don't think anyone intended it in place of, it was just a matter of the initial, as we did last year, the initial self-evaluation and then a final evaluation at the end of the year. So I'm in agreement with that.
Oh, okay. So that's not, reading this, it's not clear to me. Yeah.
So I'm open to that revision, that there's a mid-year check-in, and I'm open that there should be a mid-year check-in and also a final evaluation at the end of the year.
Great. Any other comments on that? So I think that's sufficient. I'll leave that in as a first reading, and Brendan, if you just want to update a sentence to say, we'll conduct, a mid-year check-in in January and a final evaluation before the end of the school year. I think that's a minor change. It doesn't change the spirit of anything, and we can have that as a second reading at our next board meeting. Wonderful. Next item is 2150. Christian, I know you have comments, so I will give you time for those in a moment. All I just want to say is this came up last year in our review, and we just read it and said, it's not really clearly written. It's not very robust. So we just reached out to council, and we said, I'm sure there's state law on this. We found some other policies of neighboring districts that laid it out more clearly. And the policy that's here is the text from our council that raised out of our last meeting last year, and we just didn't have a chance to get back together and vote on this year. And for whatever reason, the committee just forgot to include it in the first batch. in the fall. Christian, your comments?
So let me just start with a question, because this might make my comments shorter. Since you are the author of this, or you're the one who passed it on, or perhaps you're passing on from council, in your mind, in the last sentence of the revised policy, who is the district superintendent in reference in this policy?
Sposes, okay.
So so I think that is not clear.
Okay,
And I think that needs to be made clear, because the state law clearly says that it means a supervisory district superintendent. And I think that absolutely needs to be in this policy to make
Great.
further confusion.
fantastic addition.
Okay, so my concern, though, is there was also in the discussion that somehow there was a duty or requirement to do it, and I'm not sure that, so here's the thing about keeping it in our policy. Our board has no jurisdiction over the BOCES superintendent. They have that power from education law, and there's no need for us to specify in our policy, because we cannot require the BOCES superintendent to do anything. It's their judgment about the operation of the board in that supervisory capacity. And so I don't think that needs to be in our policy. Even, I mean, if it is in our policy, it needs to be specific, but if it really doesn't need to be in our policy, because we don't control the subject of the policy.
So, it says the superintendent may fill it, doesn't,
Okay.
I think the may does the work there that you're.
Is after 90 days where there has not been an election and there's
Right.
a declared
So,
vacancy.
yeah, just for the public, and I mean, it sounds like we're in agreement on what the state law is, so, there's really two options for the board if there is a vacancy on the board for resignation, any other reason, death, removal from office, refusal to serve. So, the board, by a majority vote of the full board, so 5 members may vote to appoint a qualified person to fill the vacancy, and that person would only be appointed until the next regular election. Or the board may call a special election to fill such vacancy within 90 days after it occurs, and that person would not serve until the next regular election, but would serve the remainder of the term of the person that they are filling the vacancy for. Or the third option is, if the vacancy remains unfilled after 90 days, the supervisory district superintendent, I think we can add that word, may fill it by appointment. So is that your understanding of state law?
That is my understanding of state law on that point, and I have some other points about the policy. So we're agreed on that point, but I have some other
Okay.
points I would like to do to improve the policy
Okay,
that are that are not connected to that at all.
okay,
Okay, so generally in this policy, in most other school districts that have this policy, they either include in this policy or have additional policies that talk about the standard for what is refusal to serve. And so what that is defined, and that's also defined in state law. And either that, sometimes it's policy 20, this is 2150, but either one's numbered 2130 or 2140 about refusal to serve, and what that means and what grounds school boards have to remove someone. And the second thing is they establish a procedure or guidelines for how they will fill the vacancy, which means, for example, last year the library board had a mid-year vacancy, and their procedure was to ask the person who did not get appointed with the most votes and offer the position to them, and then if that person refused, to the next person and the next person, which would seem to reflect the, the will or the intention of the community. We could adopt that into this policy, which I would think would take out the arbitrariness and the capriciousness of it, rather than leave it in the majority of the board. I think we could have a system where we can put out a notice and conduct interviews, which is how I just had this conversation with Joe Flaherty, the longtime president of the Minnesink Board, and he said basically what they did is when he did actually have removed a board member and filled the vacancy, they put out a public notice, they conducted interviews, there was a board vote. Or we could respect if the board member creating the vacancy is able and in good standing, meaning like they're not being removed for reasons, to respect their wishes or suggest a person to replace them if they're not able to serve on the board. And I think we could improve this policy by reflecting what we think should happen, so that any board that has to encounter this in the future has a guideline of what we think the process is, and therefore that we're not making up the procedure on the spot. since the law basically gives us that we could decide the member by having a juggling contest or drawing straws, I think it would be better to kind of set forth how we would go about it and how future boards should go about it, and also what is the grounds for things that are not death or illness or change of address that are pretty clear.
Couple thoughts. One, juggling is very difficult. I taught myself to juggle when I was like 10. I think this policy in front of us, I agree with some of your changes to beef it up. I think the policy that's in here is an improvement over our current policy. I would advocate that we vote on that as part of the first reading tonight, and that the changes that you're making to enhance it even further continue in the policy committee to make it, let's not let the perfect be the enemy of the good. Let's make an improvement which follows state law, which is more clear than our current policy, which is not very clear, and then continue to improve it as we move along.
So if I can make that even more tactical request, and tell me if I'm wrong. We vote on it tonight. It gets put on the agenda next time for approval, but then we still add it to the spring policy committee docket? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, but I think what you're talking about, and I would be two different policies. So you mentioned what is refusal to serve being a separate policy, and then I've seen other districts, and I want to say it's Somers, I believe, has an extensive 21-step process. So we've got policies, and then we have some of them have companion regulations. So ours is 2150, and they have a 2150R that's very detailed. To be honest with you, I thought it was a little too detailed, but I think that the policy committee should consider adding a 2150R and adding, you're saying the refusal to serve definition is an additional policy, Christian, or an addition to this policy?
So there are districts that break it out, and they're kind of, in a sense, complementary policies. And usually the numbers are 2130 and 2140. And then there's other districts that fold it into 2150 to have it all in one place, and they do include those paragraphs to those points to basically flesh it out and have it in one place rather than, let's say, in two different places, and therefore that it might get overlooked. And I think that's just a matter of where we can go back to the policy committee. I think we can come out with a policy, and I think we can, my preference would be go back to the policy committee and then present it after the spring policy committee meeting. If people want to vote on it, obviously we can vote on it. My preference is to pull it like the other policies, send it back to the committee, and then have this full text and then vote on that full policy, because I don't think there's any urgency to pass this policy tonight.
Well, you don't need it until you need it.
Yeah, there's no urgency until there is.
I think I like the idea of passing, if we know that, if we're all in agreement that this is the foundation of a future policy, then to me, we should vote on it, and then go the route of
with the addition of the
2150R.
word in point 3 of supervisory.
Yes.
Prior to district superintendent.
Yes, and then have an ancillary policy, however you want to phrase it, that builds on it, but it locks in what we know is an improvement over existing policy. Because to that point, we don't know when we're going to need this, but it would almost by definition be an urgent need.
I'm sorry.
Tiffany.
I'm just going to say I agree. I think voting on the changes tonight are prudent, and usually they're unforeseen circumstances where something like this would be unfortunate and would occur. However, we could certainly make it at policy committee, which I am a part of, and make it more robust to reflect some of the changes that Christian is suggesting.
Improving it tonight in no way limits us from improving it further in the future. Okay, so we will leave that in. So we've removed 4. We have made updates to 0310, the Board of Self-Evaluation, and the 2150. I won't go through those updates because they will be in front of us in text for the second reading and adoption at our next meeting. But I will trust that Brendan faithfully has captured them, and they will be correct on our next agenda. So let's take a vote on the first reading of these BOE policies. less the 4 policies that we pulled, the 0110, the 2220, the 4770, and the 8415.5. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Any abstentions? We have an abstention from Christian. Everybody else is in favor. That motion passes. That moves us on to Mr. Fink with his budget presentation. Take it away, please.
Okay. Okay, thank you. And welcome. Board of Education, budget presentation number 3, March 10th. We'll jump right in, striving for excellence every day. Again, as you're aware, we start with our vision to frame our focus on what we are doing here. We envision a school district in which every staff member is a source of knowledge and inspiration. Every building is a place of safety and support. Every leader is a pillar of integrity, and every student is a source of pride. I like our picture up there on the left-hand side with the snow, because based on today's 60-degree weather, hopefully that might be somewhere in the distant past, but we don't know. And then our smiling faces. Terry doesn't want to do any more singing snow day songs. Robust agenda today. I won't read this verbatim to save us a little bit of time. There's a little bit of repetitiveness built in here from our last budget presentation, and I just want to make note of our smiling faces of our staff here as well. I know I mentioned our students, but we have an incredibly robust and excellent, efficient, and shining star staff that starts with our school bus drivers and our cafeteria workers and custodial workers, our teachers and our teaching assistants. Everybody runs all the way up to our superintendent of schools. So with that, we'll jump right in. We'll do a little bit of review of what our goals were at the last meeting that we talked about. Lowest possible tax levy, but stay within the property tax cap, maintain our current programs, continue to support and grow instruction. We did our rollover budget in the last meeting. We presented that, and I'm going to turn back to that in the next couple slides. And then we asked ourselves kind of what's the next steps after that rolled budget. And we came out with those R words: re-engage, request, reevaluate, redistribute, reconcile, readjust, and realize success, okay? That keep moving forward approach. So we've talked about this as well, our budget development process, ongoing, year-round. You've seen this slide now. This will be the 3rd time going around. So at our last meeting, we talked about our preliminary, and I'm going to use preliminary and revised budgets. So here is our preliminary expenditures that we rolled out at the last meeting, which was $93.4 million compared to the previous year of 90.2, difference of 3.1 million. We still have a number of open items that we have to nail down as we go throughout the budget process. A lot of this is special education related, but we do have our contract negotiations that we have discussed. So fast forward to the next slide, and I can kind of toggle back and forth with respect to our revised budget approach, okay? Instead of a 93.4, we are at a $92.7 million budget. Compared to last year, that's a $2.4 million increase. Our open items are still going to stay the same, okay, as we went from our preliminary to our revised. We're 2 weeks away. We've had some change. We worked on that with our district administration. So right there, I'm going to pause. And how did we get there? How did we get to this revised budget? So we talk about teacher attrition. And attrition is teachers leaving the profession, and in this case, retiring. This year, we have 10 total teacher retirements, which is significant. 5 of those teachers we can replace through the traditional posting and hiring process. We're going to replace 5 of those positions. The other 5, we re-examined those positions, and they can be filled by redistribution of staff due to enrollment or program shifts. By doing this, there's no teachers or staff who are cut or eliminated. And we have not impacted our instructional programs. Okay? So again, attrition, Teachers leaving the profession, this year retirements, 10 total, 5 replaced traditionally, 5 replaced or backfilled through a redistribution of staff. On our revenue, our preliminary revenue came out at 90.6, and that was a $3.1 million increase. We were using a 3% property tax cap, 3% property tax levy increase of our 3.08. Our state aid, we've kept the same, and our miscellaneous revenue. We still don't know what state aid's gonna be. With respect to our revised expenditure, revised revenue, $90.3 million, a difference of 2.9 from year to year. What did we do here? We were able to drop down our property tax levy to 2.5. So from 3.0 to 2.5. That gets us $1.3 million. Our state aid, again, staying the same, and our miscellaneous staying the same. We're still waiting for those state aid figures, which ideally come in April, we hope, but could come as late April and into May. silos. That's all I have here today. We have March tonight, April 7th, April 24th is our budget adoption, our last opportunity to adopt the budget, and then our May 20th budget vote. I know I'm not getting out of here without questions, so,
Bass? Thank you. Bass?
Okay, thank you, Jim. Thanks for another great presentation today. I mean, very clearly illustrated. Yeah.
It is, but I think
But
it's far enough away.
I'm far from it.
I can hear you, but they can't hear you on YouTube if you're not talking.
Okay, I'm gonna repeat. Thanks for the great presentation today. I appreciate that. Two quick question, just for clarification for me and for anybody else who maybe is asking the same question. One is the $5 million reserve maximum kind of, ceiling. Just who, I think we talked about it before, but when it's this, let me rephrase. Is it subjective or objective? I mean, that's what I'm saying. Kind of who says it's 5 million, not 3, not 6, and how we come to that conclusion it should be $5 million.
Okay, so you're talking about the capital reserve that we established, is that correct? So, yeah, going back to these two capital reserves, that is, I believe, a limit that is set for us, for the district. I don't believe by New York State we can go more than 5 million in funding over the course of time. So, by New York State's guidelines and standards for capital reserve funding, based on our district size, I believe that's how that's set up.
Right. Yeah, thanks. I'm trying to figure out whether it's subjective number, kind of just because I said so, it's 5 million, or it's based on some other factors.
I believe there's a qualifying factor
Like
of
the
our
size of the district.
I believe so.
Yeah, okay. Thanks. And my second question is, again, hypothetical. If we get sued, the district gets sued, and you gotta really come up with the money, going to your silos, where would the money come from?
Perfect, great question. If we were to experience a lawsuit, hopefully we would have some insurance that would cover it, because we are covered by a number of different insurance policies. But let's say, again, hypothetically, worst case scenario, we end up with a large lawsuit that would come from our unassigned fund balance, that for.
So, at the beginning of your presentation, you said, the 25-26 budget goals are lowest possible tax levy, maintain current programs, and it actually meeting those goals over the long term. And let me just put out the logic here. When we have, part of our budget, administrative salaries goes up by 4% a year, the teacher's contract is scheduled for 2% a year, and you increase the tax levy at a lower rate, eventually that's going to push, because tax levy now, we're more or less assuring that we're going to have to increase the tax levy by a larger amount some point in the future. And so the point is that this might solve the problem for this year, but I'm concerned that what will happen in the future is that we will have to take larger and larger, and the longer we put off that day of reckoning, the larger the cuts will be when they do occur. Or we'll have a larger tax levy that we'll have to approve. And I'm concerned about that because the one thing we won't have in the future is a time machine to come back to this point in time. And I'm also, it's nice that the tax levy is now down from 3 to 2.5%, but there was also a raft of district needs in your first presentation that will go unaddressed. And it seems that having a slightly higher tax levy, and one thing that was pointed out to me when I went up to Albany is that we are the only district in Orange County that has not used their full allocation of UPK money from the state, which is about 40 children who are not going to get UPK and families because we've decided to lower the tax levy, and that seems to be not putting students first. And this is mostly a statement, not really a question, but I asked you at the last meeting where we stood in terms of per pupil expenditure relative to the other school districts in the county, and we were dead last when I looked at the New York State report card. And it seems that we are perhaps not spending as much as any district in this county, many of them not as wealthy as we are by, the numbers that you would get for the area. And it seems that if we have an opportunity to use the tax levy space, given that in the last 3 years we have been significantly under, that this would be a good opportunity if there are needs to maintain that so that we don't have the shock in future years.
So I'll address a few of those. So we decided to look at the deficit and come up with a recommendation to the board. So I would love talk amongst board members, because this is just a recommendation. You all set the final tax levy. You decide what to do with the fund balance. All of those are completely in your purview. What we decided to do after the last meeting, which Mr. Fink articulated, was let's take another hard look at our current staffing, what our needs assessment was, meet with schools and departments, and figure out what we can do on our part to bring this down. So at my direction, based on the history of Cornwall, I directed Mr. Fink to bring the tax levy recommendation down from 3. And all I did was look at past history. Anytime we approach 3% in Cornwall, we've come very close to not having a passed budget. So that's from me as the recommendation. With regards to the needs assessment, so every year we're going to have needs articulated by our teachers, our staff, our administrators. That's going to happen every year. But we also have a reality check conversation to say this might not be the year that we're going to be able to address these needs. So again, I'm asking you, what is your priority as we go into the 25-26 school year? And that's how we came up with what can we handle through attrition, looking at enrollment of programs, things of that nature, so that we're not cutting any staff. So this is a recommendation. Again, you're the Board of Education. You come up with where, if you want it to be 3-1, raise your hands and put the tax levy at 3-1. We felt that it was our job to provide the board with some runway, that you would have some room to make some recommendations, whether it be UPK, whether it be funding another teacher, what have you. Those are hard decisions that you're going to have to make, but at the end of the day, we were facing a $322K deficit, and we did our job to bring that down without, in our opinion, without any staffing leaving our district, and being able to maintain the quality of program that we have.
I would beg to differ that we are wealthy. I think most of us raising children in this district love our district very much, and I'm very proud that all 5 of our children have been dragons and are dragons. However, I think 3% is outrageous, and I, for one, appreciate that it's been brought down. I would like to see it brought down even more as a taxpayer. But I would like to think that most of the people that I know who are raising children in this district would not look around and say, what inflation has happened in the last year. Eggs are $9 a dozen. I don't think we would look around at this point and say, yes, tax us more. I, for one, won't, and I wouldn't advocate for that. I'm thrilled we were able to get it down to 2.5 while maintaining our very high standards, so I appreciate your work, Mr. Fink. I'd like to see it come down even more, quite frankly. I don't think that we're wealthy right now. I think between the cost of living and inflation right now, it's not the right time to hit us with high taxes.
Thank you for that. Anybody else?
I just have a quick comment question, not to put you on the spot here, but maybe for next time. Could you just provide us with the math, like what is the average homeowner's difference on these different tax increase possibilities? Thank
Yeah,
you.
we can do that.
Thank you, Christine. Brendan?
Yeah, I just want to add one one data point. So, Christian, you always mention, or you have mentioned at the last two meetings, the lowest cost per pupil in the county, and that's absolutely right. But I think that is only one side of the story, and that's not really how people calculate their tax burden. While it's true that we have the lowest cost per pupil, we also have just the highest aggregate taxes per household in Orange County. We pay the most in property taxes. And you mentioned last time, a history of Cornwall boards that have always been penny pinching, for lack of a better word. It's not a coincidence. We've all, generation after generation, have been dealing with the same underlying issues in Cornwall, which is we have a lot of space in our district that we cannot develop on, that is not bringing in business revenue, which is not the case for other districts. So, it's not coincidence that many boards have come to the same conclusion. And I think one thing that Terry pointed out correctly, whenever we have gone a little bit higher in the tax levy, our budgets have passed in the low to mid 50s. And that too is a difference. It is true, Christian. In the last 10 years, it is. In the last 2 or 3 years, we've had a very good run of it, but prior to that, they were very close, including one failed one, within this generation. So I think that while the lowest cost per pupil stat is important, and I think is a credit to the whole district for getting the most out of that money, if we are having a conversation about the tax impact and our ability to raise taxes and to ask the homeowners to shoulder that burden, we have to look at it from their perspective. They wouldn't go into it and say, wow, my taxes are going up to 3% and I'm going to be paying $15,000 a year, but we are getting the most out of our dime. It's certainly more than other districts. That's just not how they would make that calculation.
Thank you for that, Brendan. I know, Christian, you're itching. I am going to go back to you. I want to give everybody an opportunity first. I just want to thank everybody. I think this has been a really good discussion and a way to, disagree without being disagreeable. There's differing viewpoints on how we construct parts of the budget, and this is, our important job as a board is to have this discussion in a nice, civil manner. I just want to commend everybody on how this has been going so far. I think everybody except for myself and Carl have had an opportunity. So Carl, I'll see if Carl's going to pass. So I'm going to ask the question: the 5 teacher positions filled by redistribution of staff or enrollment in program shifts. Can we have details on that, please?
So the 2 that have been completely solidified are at the elementary level, some early intervention staffing that we added back with the federal funds would be reallocated to classroom teachers. The other 3 teachers would be at the middle school and the high school level, and then one that we're still looking at with regards to enrollment in our special education program. Those are the other 3 positions, and those are really looking at numbers. They shift every single year. So, for example, at the high school level, our students are registering for courses for next year. So however that pans out, we have it narrowed down, but depending on where our students vote to take their courses for next year, that's where one of the positions will occur. A change in enrollment at the middle school for programming is that other position, and then we're having ongoing conversations with one more department. So we're really confident based on where we are with enrollment bubbles and things of that nature with shifting those positions around and still being able to provide high quality instruction for our students.
Great, thank you for that. So I will just make the comment as well to add, to echo Brendan's sentiments that it's difficult when looking at our town because we just really don't have any industrial base or, large commercial base in this town, as we all know, as far as taxpayers go, and really a lot of the tax burden, it's almost exclusively borne on the back of homeowners. So that's important to keep in mind, that other towns in this county have large industrial commercial facilities that bear or shoulder that burden. Something that's beyond our control as a school board, but something to be mindful of. So I'll echo Brendan's sentiment there and say, historically speaking, large tax increases over 2% have had difficulty passing in this town. So I would just echo that sentiment. Christian.
So let me just address the data aspect that people are asserting these facts, and I would gladly share that with anyone here. If you were to regress the tax levy increase against support for the budget over any time frame in the last 20 years, whether you want to just look at the years under the tax cap era, the full length of 25 years, or even in the last 10 years, the number where you get close to 50 and you take the best fit line of that is significantly above what you're asserting. And if you like, maybe we can present that, because I think that's the most objective way to determine what have voters in Cornwall supported. Secondly, my concern is not to, let's say, tax high. What I am saying is that by taxing low, you're making a higher tax levy increase to maintain the same programs inevitable. And that at that time, that will be a much larger increase, and the carts will be harder because we have not increased it to the level we've done now. So this is, if you want to keep the tax levy low, we have to do something now for the future. Perhaps my children are in kindergarten and pre-K right now, and I don't just want a good school district this year. I would like to have the same school district in 13 years when they're graduating from it. Secondly, as people have mentioned, a lot of people here, the main thing in Cornwall is residences. And therefore, for a lot of people, their main asset is their house. And as Dartmouth economics professor William Fiskell has analyzed, school taxes function as a capital expenditure on your house. That your wealth, your asset increases because you spend, and the school helps to anchor the price of your house. And you can just do that simply by comparing two houses in, let's say, this district, exactly the same design, built in the same year, roughly in the same location, and look at the actual sale price of those houses. So this is encouraging people to be good stewards over a long period of time, because while we could lower the cost this year, what you're going to see perhaps if we ever fall from the #1 rating in the county, that what you'll see is a wealth loss by across the town because our school districts perhaps are not performing to the same quality when all of our peers are spending more. And so that's kind of a short-sighted way to look at it, and I think that I would like us to think in those terms over a longer period than a single year in a single budget. So what I would say is the analogy that, since we're talking about farms, I can lower my budget this year by not fixing the roof of my barn. Because you know what, it'll probably last this year, and then perhaps next year, it won't fall apart. And then when it does, then we have a hole in the roof and it's a lot more expensive. And you know what, I don't have to be figurative about that because that literally happened in Cornwall in recent memory, in terms of the middle school's gym roof. We have two buildings that are over 100 years, or at or over 100 years old. That's a fairly old school building. And so an investment perspective is we put money in to lower the cost in the future. And if we look at past Cornwall decisions where we've gone lower, it has ended up costing us more when we didn't take the lower cost option in the past. So I think a better perspective on this, and part of the reason for a strategic plan, is to, in a sense, not only plan on what we need to spend on, but how we're going to have a smooth revenue increase over time to address those needs and those programs that I think most of the people in this district want. And I think that is a better way to look at it in terms of everyone who's a homeowner knows you can put off repairs on your house. You can go a few more years on replacing your heating system or investing in new windows or replacing a roof. And if you do that long term, it ends up costing you more money because the inevitable repair is going to cost a lot more than the maintenance year to year, which is what I see keeping the tax levy at a low, manageable, but smooth increase, not having, let's say, a tax levy at 0 when your tax levy cap was in over 4, I believe, in that year, and 1.25 and 1.75. And I've made this argument before, but we can look at, and I've made this analogy, and Mr. Fink probably knows it well, what happened in Carmel last year, and our revenue growth over time is lower than Carmel's. And we know what happened in Carmel in terms of cutting a deep cut in their educational program. But they did it with one of the highest per pupil expenditures in their county, so perhaps maybe that was right sizing. It's not for me to say, but we're doing it from the lowest spending. And we are mostly talking about this in terms of spending being too high and too low. And also what happens when you don't spend for it in the school district, and a parent then has to spend more money for tutoring or some other activities, or rely on the PTO to make donations to make up for what we're not spending as a school district, that doesn't actually lower the overall cost for our community. And I think we need to start maybe perhaps looking at this, because this has been a long-term concern. And I'll just finish with just one thing, because as I said last meeting, I've been reading old, Cornwall locals and looking at letters to the editor about everything about every school budget going well back into the 1990s. And I'd like to go back, because what did adults do when I was a student? And there was a year where Cornwall's tax levy increase was 10%, and this is well before the tax levy. And the Cornwall local surveyed a bunch of local residents, and there was one woman who was clearly either in her 70s or 80s. And at a 10% tax levy increase, she said, of course I'm going to vote for it, everything for the schools. And that is the attitude that I think made us into the school district that we're proud of, and it would be a sad thing if we don't honor that legacy.
Thank you. I appreciate that long explanation. I'm still a hard no.
Thank you. Just give me one moment.
I just feel the need to qualify something really quickly. I think, Christian, to your point about supporting a legacy, I think as a district, we do support the legacy of supporting schools. That doesn't necessarily mean it has to be through tax dollars. And I'm not landing hard on either side of the argument, because I want to see some more facts. But I take exception, I think, to thinking that the only way to uphold a legacy of really having a community invested in the schools is only through taxes and increasing taxes. I think our community shows that a lot and all the time without necessarily a tax increase.
Thank you. So I think what we'll do, just to continue the work here, again, I appreciate all the thoughts shared by everybody here at the dais, is we have another presentation next meeting on March 24th, and the budget will really start to take final shape then, and we can sort of really continue that discussion and go around and go, do we, all right, is 2.5 where we want to stick? Do we want to increase? What other options do we want to look at? But, I think, Terry, you really said it of, hey, we felt it prudent as an administration to make a recommendation, but ultimately you and the board are sitting here, that's your decision. So I think it's best to pick up those nuts and bolts at our next meeting. Would that make sense to you, John, since you're putting it together?
Yep, absolutely.
All right, so I think we'll finish this up for this evening. Thank you for the presentation, John. Thank you, everybody, for the discussion. And we will continue our budget work next time. And now I will try and find my agenda. I think public comment is next. I don't know where I put my agenda. Public comment? Any takers? Okay, so no takers for public comment, and that will move us to adjournment. Can I have a motion to adjourn the meeting? We have a motion from Carl. Can we have a second? Second from Christian. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Thank you all. We will see you in 2 weeks.